The person being accused is now responsible for disproving the accusation.
She always does that. Burden of proof reversal. Let me bring that back up. Burden of proof reversal.
This is also burden of proof reversal.
Yeah. Forcing the accused to disprove the claim. She does that all the time. Wow. Shout out for sure. I mean, doesn't have to start with the Macrons. Could have been back with Trio Logic or Blake Lively or whomever else she's had beef with in the past. Just think about that. Ben Shapiro. Think about these little small nuances that she's used.
But also, Piers, I think you are better than defending a criminal network, right? And that's the biggest piece of the story.
Wow. Grace and peace, everybody. We're back. You know the Macron case is coming up soon enough. So I figured it would be, let's just do a little primer, refresh our memory on Candace and the Macron. So I thought this was a great video to really help give us some context, help us understand how we got here with the whole Candace is being sued by the president and first lady of France. So with no further ado, let's bring it in. Let's go.
And as a mother, I will stand up to this. I mean, you really are asking people to defy their common sense in this moment, that you are not accurately presenting what has happened here. You are right now defending a government that lied. I'm only interested in truth.
You're going to realize you've been completely duped. What do you do then?
This interview between Piers Morgan and Candace Owens is a masterclass, not in truth-seeking, but in how language can be used to avoid it. It's a study in manipulative rhetoric. I'll take a closer look at a few key moments where the wording does the heavy lifting. Not evidence, not verification, but strategic phrasing designed to shape perception. Once you see the pattern, it becomes very hard to unsee. And it starts immediately.
Are you a woman?
I am, in fact, a woman, and I certainly would never sue someone to prove to the world that is a fact. I would probably be laughing.
This is subtle but important. She's been asked to confirm a fact. Instead, she answers with a hypothetical about behavior. This is what's called a frame shift. Instead of what is true, she moves us to how would an innocent person behave? That's a completely different question. And embedded in that response is an implication. If you do sue, maybe you're hiding something. That's not evidence. That's insinuation through contrast. Then we get the first major pivot.
But isn't that exactly what Candace has done pretty much in everything? She presents a situation like, well, hey, if you had nothing to hide, you'd give me your phones. If you had nothing to hide, you'd give me your alibi, your whereabouts. You tell me what you're thinking about this situation or where you were when this plane flew over your head. She would do that. She does that all the time, rather. All right, shout out. Let's go. Piers and Candace.
Well, how can you prove to me you're a woman if I don't believe you?
I wouldn't have to. You could do 18 hours of a show saying that I was living as a man for 30 years. And the easiest thing for me to do, obviously, would be to just release pictures of me living, yearbooks, me on the cheerleading team, me pregnant, me with my children, raising my children. Long before, if I ever got to the point where I thought that I needed to launch a lawsuit, I would probably just release a few photos.
Notice what's happening here. She's replacing a clear, testable standard with something else entirely. Piers pushes back.
But my point is this. You would be able to prove it to me by taking a simple test, right? You would just say, here we are. Here are the results. Here's the test. That's the best way to do this, right?
Now we have two competing standards, an objective test versus narrative evidence in the form of photos and life history. Candace never engages with a stronger, verifiable standard. Instead, she pivots back to the weaker one.
Actually, because we were in communication with her legal team long before she launched this website, we never asked for something that deep. We literally gave her a list of 21 yes or no questions and asked her to just answer it on the record.
This is called evidential reframing. A strong form of proof is swapped for one that's easier to control and easier to narrate. She reinforces it with vivid imagery, yearbooks, pregnancy, which is no accident. These are mental pictures designed to persuade, not verifiable evidence. The audience is encouraged to imagine her life story, while the claim itself remains untested. By calling it something that deep, she remains intentionally vague. She doesn't name the test at all. This strategic ambiguity lets her appear reasonable, "Oh, we didn't ask for anything extreme," while sidestepping the actual challenge. It also carries an implicit presupposition that the requested evidence is excessive or intrusive, subtly shifting the audience's evaluation onto Pierce's request rather than the claim itself, combined with her hedging words. The phrasing projects caution and thoughtfulness, masking the fact that she never addresses the core issue, whether the claim that Brigitte Macron is male can actually be proven. Now comes a key move.
We literally gave her a list of 21 yes or no questions and asked her to just answer it on the record. Also offered to fly over to Paris and interview Brigitte to get her side of the story. Before we even launched the first episode of the Becoming Brigitte series, we were in communication and offered them a chance to rebut. And they came back and said, we don't have to submit anything to prove that she is a woman and we don't want to answer your questions.
This is where the logic breaks, because what she's implying is they didn't answer, therefore something is wrong. This is an argument from silence. In reality, there's a third option. They don't engage because the claim isn't credible. But that possibility is never acknowledged. Instead, the refusal is reframed as suspicious. This is also burden of proof reversal. The person being accused is now responsible for disproving the accusation.
She always does that. Burden of proof reversal. Let me bring that back up. Burden of proof reversal.
This is also burden of proof reversal.
Yeah. Forcing the accused to disprove the claim. She does that all the time. Wow. Shout out for sure.
The person being accused is now responsible for disproving the accusation. That's not how evidence works. That's how accusations sustain themselves. The words, literally, and just answer it, reinforce a framing. Literally signals precision and honesty, making it sound like the effort required is minimal and straightforward. Just answer it further minimizes the request, implying fairness and reasonableness, while positioning the other side as secretive and uncooperative. Linguistically, these small word choices help present her as diligent and rational, even though the core factual question is never addressed. All of this doesn't stop Candace from framing herself as reasonable. She never actually addresses the core factual question, whether the claim that Brigitte Macron is male can be definitively proven or disproven. Instead, she focuses on her team's actions, sending 21 yes or no questions, offering to fly to Paris, and framing the other side's refusal as unreasonable. She emphasizes narrative evidence, photos, yearbooks, life history, rather than engaging with any objective, falsifiable standard, like the test Pierce mentioned. All of this shifts attention away from the claim itself and onto her own diligence and fairness. The audience sees effort and thoroughness, but the actual question of evidence remains untested. This is an example of deflecting from the core issue while maintaining the appearance of reasonableness. Even when Pierce asks directly, Candace doesn't answer the core issue.
If on day one of this case, she just produces an actual test report that says she's a woman, you're going to realize in that moment you've been completely duped. What do you do then?
Okay, Piers, I'm not concerned about it because, like I said, it's been about 10 years and Brigitte could have done that at any moment. She's been in multiple lawsuits, involved in lawsuits, trying to shut journalists up.
She sidesteps the scenario, focusing on the past 10 years, on other lawsuits, and that Brigitte could have provided evidence at any time. This is a subtle form of evasion. She acknowledges the question, but deflects the consequences, framing herself as confident and reasonable, while leaving the claim itself unfalsifiable. By refusing to accept or address direct evidence, she ensures that no proof could definitively disprove her assertion. In effect, the claim can always be explained away, keeping the controversy alive and preserving her rhetorical control over the audience. Now watch the escalation.
It's a very serious subject, actually, Piers. And if you watched even the first episode of the Becoming Brigitte series, you'll understand there's an entire network of criminals that are surrounding the Macrons.
This is a major and very deliberate shift. We've moved from a specific, testable claim to a vague, expansive network. This is a classic motte-and-bailey tactic. The Bailey, the extreme claim, Brigitte Macron is a man. The motte, a broader, safer claim. There are questionable people around them. When challenged, the argument retreats to the safer ground. Also, notice the language.
Entire network that are surrounding.
These are non-specific association terms. They don't assert directly. They imply. That's how you suggest something without having to prove it. Next, she appeals directly to the audience.
You're going to realize in that moment you've been completely duped. What do you do then?
Piers, I'm not concerned about it because, like I said, it's been about 10 years and Brigitte could have done that at any moment. She's been in multiple lawsuits, involved in lawsuits, trying to shut journalists up. I mean, you really are asking people to defy their common sense in this moment. They know what has happened here. They know that we went to Brigitte before we started the series to get Brigitte's side of this. We were in contact with Brigitte's lawyers, the same ones that filed this case. We asked simple yes or no questions. We were not requiring a blood test. So, like I said, you are asking people at home to suspend their common sense and to truly believe that rather than answering yes or no questions, rather than maybe at first going after the author of the book, Xavier Poussard, who is a Frenchman, for defamation, that would be the first thing. Why don't you launch, at least at the same time, both of these suits? I'm going to go after Candace and Xavier Poussard. They are instead only going after me for defamation and not the person who sourced this entire quote unquote rumor. There is, let me tell you, Piers, too many people who have watched this series, okay? They're watching your show now and they know that you are not accurately presenting what has happened here. But also, Piers, I think you are better than defending a criminal network, right? And that's the biggest piece of the story.
Wow.
Now, disagreement isn't just wrong, it's irrational. This is called an appeal to common sense, but functionally it works as a shortcut around evidence. It instructs the audience. If you don't agree, you're ignoring what's obvious. But here, common sense is doing something very specific. It's replacing careful analysis with intuition, and intuition is easy to manipulate. It can be guided by selective framing, emotionally charged language, or repeated assertions, rather than by facts. By presenting her view as obvious, Candace encourages the audience to accept it without scrutiny, keeping them on her side even when the evidence is weak or absent. By teaming up with the audience, she frames Piers, not herself, as the one asking people to suspend their common sense. This creates an us versus them dynamic, aligning listeners with her perspective and preempting the reasonable observation that she's the one asking the audience to ignore evidence. Manipulatively, she makes it sound as if she's not alone in judging Piers's presentation of what has happened here. She rhetorically implies consensus, suggesting others see Piers as obstructive, even though he's simply asking questions. She also reverses the roles of scrutiny. Instead of her claims being examined, she casts Piers as defending wrongdoing, implying he's enabling a criminal network, a serious accusation she hasn't substantiated. At the same time, she employs narrative substitution, replacing the simple, falsifiable question with a long list of procedural details and contextual stories, which appear thorough but avoid addressing the core factual claim. Finally, she emphasizes that the legal action targets her alone for defamation, not the journalist who first published the book. This victim framing positions her as selectively persecuted, cultivating audience sympathy, while simultaneously shifting focus away from the central falsifiable question, whether her claims about Brigitte Macron's gender are supported by objective evidence. Then we get the clearest signal of all.
I would stake my entire career on the notion that she was actually born Jean-Michel Trogneau. I believe that, right? And
this isn't evidence, it's personal commitment. And in rhetoric, that matters, because it signals something deeper. The belief is no longer conditional, it's identity-based. Once someone ties their reputation, their career, their identity to a claim, backing down becomes almost impossible. This is how arguments become non-falsifiable in practice, not because they can't be disproven, but because they won't be. The speaker refuses to ever concede, no matter what evidence appears, which is the opposite of seeking truth.
I'm only interested in truth.
Sure, because clearly she isn't motivated at all by the views, money, and attention generated from making claims she can't substantiate in any meaningful or scientific way.
And I just want you to think about this, man. Think about how much of this applies to how she's been dealing with Turning Point and Erica Kirk and anybody else for that matter, Trump, the Trump administration, whatever. Think about how these little tidbits play out in there. So this has been very helpful.
And I'm willing to go through this because it's an important story about government deception. But even if you suspended that, you are right now defending a government that lied even about the beginning of their quote unquote love story, in which his parents removed him from school. This is wrong. Everything that's happening right now in France is wrong and it is perverted. And as a mother, I will stand up to this. And I am confident that we will emerge as the winners of this, because in America, truth is an absolute defense against defamation. And I am telling the truth.
Candace begins by framing herself as both victim and hero.
And I'm willing to go through this.
Positioning herself as bravely enduring scrutiny, while implying that Brigitte and the French government are aggressors.
Wow.
She invokes her status as a mother, completely unprompted, which functions as an appeal to audience sympathy and ethical alignment. This rhetorical signaling of concern and responsibility is a classic tactic to encourage trust, especially when the audience might be skeptical. She then makes sweeping generalizations.
Everything that's happening right now in France is wrong and it is perverted.
Casting the broader situation in morally extreme terms and priming the audience to accept a framing. It's an appeal to mental images, guiding listeners to visualize the enemy rather than seek verification or proof. Notice the diversion tactic embedded in.
It's an important story about government deception. But even if you suspended that, you are right now defending a government that lied even about the beginning of their quote-unquote love story.
Here, Candace shifts attention away from her unproven claims about government deception to Pierce's hypothetical position, implying wrongdoing on his part. The accusation is entirely unsubstantiated and functions as a rhetorical smokescreen. It frames Pierce as complicit and redirects scrutiny away from the central question, whether her claims about Brigitte Macron are supported by evidence. Finally, she asserts that she and her team will emerge as winners, an extension of her earlier rhetoric, because she has tied her career, reputation, and identity to the claim. Conceding is effectively off the table, and victory is presented as inevitable. Together, these moves distract from the factual core, while maximizing audience alignment and emotional investment. Invoking America here does a few things rhetorically. It situates the conflict within a context familiar and reassuring to her audience, signaling that she's operating under legal protections they trust. It also implicitly contrasts US norms with France, suggesting that her position is strengthened simply by being in an American legal and cultural framework. This functions as a subtle appeal to authority and reassurance, bolstering her argument while shifting attention away from the underlying factual claims. To his credit, Pierce tries to force the issue.
I've seen your slightly torturous explanation for how she's managed to secretly have 3 kids and it wasn't her and she's a man. But ultimately, if she proves she's a woman, which is very easily provable, your whole case just implodes, doesn't it?
This is an attempt to restore a clear falsification condition, a simple standard by which the claim could be tested. But notice what happens. Candace doesn't engage that standard directly. Instead, she pivots to a series of alternative focal points, unanswered questions, past behavior, and ongoing suspicion. She says,
well, Pierce, it sounds like you're on our side. It's been 10 years of the press saying that she was born a woman. She sued people for cyberbullying. She sued people for speaking wrong about a document. And yet the easiest path would have just been to simply release photos from 30 years of your life.
By framing it this way, she makes it seem as if Pierce agrees with her, creating a false impression of consensus. Meanwhile, the core claim about Brigitte Macron's gender is never directly addressed. This pattern, acknowledging a challenge superficially, then pivoting to other issues, keeps the claim effectively unfalsifiable and manipulates the audience's perception of the exchange, all without actually responding to the factual question. This is manipulation in action. What I've examined here is more than just a single case. This is a pattern often seen with podcasters like Candace Owens, where claims are deliberately framed to be controversial and attention-grabbing, regardless of whether they can be proven in any meaningful or scientific way. Audiences listen closely because they identify with her political beliefs, alleged conservative values, or life stories, and in doing so, they often ignore or fail to critically examine the issues. Over time, this approach fosters unquestioning loyalty and reinforces a personality-driven following, which is exactly how personality cults emerge, where adherence to the figure takes precedence over engagement with reality. This level of manipulative and at times deceptive rhetoric isn't limited to this particular subject. It raises a more specific question. If Candace Owens is using these strategies here, where else might she be relying on them? And how often are these same techniques shaping what her audience accepts as true, without those claims ever being properly examined? Liking someone's alleged political stance or values isn't an excuse to ignore their manipulation. If you like the video, click the like button. See you next time.
All right. Yeah, I thought that was super helpful, especially given the fact, and the link will be down in the description, considering the fact of how she's been playing TPUSA, Erica Kerr, and everybody else. How many of those little small nuances have we seen played out other places? I mean, it doesn't have to start with the Macrons. It could have been back with Trio Logic or Blake Lively or whomever else she's had beef with in the past. Just think about that. Ben Shapiro. Think about these little small nuances that she's used. I appreciate y'all tapping in with me. Thank you so much for supporting. Thank you so much for liking the video, commenting down below. Let me know what you think about it, of course. And thank you so much for subscribing and helping us get just that much closer to hitting 100,000 subscribers by the end of April. Thank you so much. Until then, everybody, Grace and peace. Thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of the JWhit Podcast. If you enjoyed today's show, please do me a favor and hit me up with that 3-piece special. Like the video, subscribe, and of course, share it with somebody who would also enjoy this type of content. And make sure you leave a comment because I do pin the best comments to the top. So thank you so much for tuning in today. And until next time, everybody, grace and peace.